Hello everyone, welcome to Brain Blitz Audios. Today, in this episode of Mind Maps, we're going to be looking at the 14th chapter of Science in Grade 10 CBSE. The name of this chapter is Sources of Energy. Now, this is a chapter that deals with energy, how to conserve energy, and the various sources of energy that we use. Now, this topic is very vast, and it's not completed at grade 10. It goes on to your higher grades as well. So, in order to take a topic this vast, the best way to do it is with the help of a mind map. Mind maps help us to revise topics in detail during the last minutes of your revision. However, they can be quite extensive, so this video is to explain the mind map a little bit so that you can make sense out of it. So, the topic here is sources of energy. We're going to be looking at the changes in energy, the forms of energy, and the various sources of energy. We will look at traditional sources, alternative sources, as well as renewable sources. Now, energy. Energy is what powers us. And when we define the term source of energy, this is something which we can use to trap or take in energy. Now, in the world, we have heard of terms such as energy crisis and energy loss, but if you do know the laws of energy, you know that energy cannot be changed. It cannot be destroyed or created. It can only be transformed from one form to another. Now, but then why do we say that we have an energy crisis? The thing is, when we're converting energy from one form to another, in most of the situations, it gets converted into two or more forms. And one of the forms is always wasted heat. And this heat gets dissipated and it cannot be recovered as easily as the other forms of energy. So therefore, this heat loss would result in lower energy being transferred. And that's why we face an energy crisis and we look forward to new sources of energy. Now, an ideal source of energy is one which is easy to use and transport. It does not pollute its environment. It has a high amount of energy, and it's also safe to use. So these are some of the characteristics of a good source of energy. Let's look at energy changes. Now, when we look at energy changes, we need to remember the law of energy conservation. This says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. And this is a basic principle that we need to keep in mind when we look at energy and the transfer of energy. So energy cannot be created or destroyed, but the thing is that when we are converting energy, there's always some heat that escapes. And this heat cannot be reclaimed as easily as other forms of energy, and that's why energy conservation is foremost in our daily routine. Now, we use tools and machines to convert electrical energy to heat energy and back again. And another example for an energy converter are plants, which convert solar energy to chemical energy, that is food that we eat. And when we talk about energy, mostly we convert kinetic energy to potential energy or potential energy to kinetic energy, so we need to know what are these types of energies. Basically, potential energy is the energy that's stored according to the potential of the object, and kinetic energy is the energy that's found in moving objects. So potential energy is found in stationary objects, while kinetic energy is found in moving objects. Now, let's look at some forms of energy. And we've already discussed potential and kinetic energy. Potential energy is found in stationary objects, and kinetic energy is found in moving objects. But when we're talking about energy and its sources, it is a good idea to look at the types of energy sources that we use. For example, we use chemical energy, the energy that's stored in food, and then we eat it so as to regain our energy levels. Similarly, we use solar energy, energy that's possessed by the sun. And we use heat energy in order to do things like ironing or dishwashing. And electrical energy is used quite a lot these days in order to charge up our devices and to make things work. We use light energy that was released by objects such as, CFLs, LEDs, etc., in order to light up our world. And sound energy is the energy that we hear through vibrations, and nuclear energy is the energy that's formed by breaking up atoms. If you want to learn more techniques about this, then you will find that in your grade 12 syllabus. But for now, just remember that nuclear energy is very powerful, for one thing, and for another thing, it's formed by breaking up atoms into smaller atoms. So it's breaking the nucleus of an atom, and that releases a hell lot of energy. Now, let's look at the sources of energy. We looked at forms. So how does the energy get released by that object? But let's look at sources of energy. Now, when we look at energy sources, we basically have three types. We have traditional sources, we have renewable sources, and so when you're talking about renewable, we should also talk about non-renewable as well. So we have non-renewable sources, then we have alternative sources of energy. First and foremost, when it comes to energy sources, is fuels. So these are traditional and they are non-renewable, or at least most of them are. So basically, we use fuels to run our machines. So when you burn fuels, you release energy. And depending on the type of machine, you either convert the energy to electrical energy, or you use the same energy you convert it to mechanical energy in order to power things. And we have two types of fuels, basically, fossil fuels and biomass fuels. Now, fossil fuels are fuels which are obtained from fossils. No, these are not the fossils that you see in paleontology. These are fossils of various animals that have been converted into oil, coal, etc. Coal is found from plant matter, and petroleum is the fossil fuel that we get from animal matter. So those are basically the two types of fossil fuels that you get. Petroleum is then refined to form other fuels such as petrol, diesel, LPG, etc. So all of those are derivatives of petroleum, and coal is used in thermal plants. So in thermal plants, we heat up water, and then that results in transfer of energy and usage of energy. Now, these fossil fuels, they pollute the environment, and they are also non-renewable. So that means one day we would exhaust the reserves of these fuels. The reason being that these take billions of years to form, and we're extracting them at a rate faster than they're forming. So therefore, these fuels will one day run out. The next kind of fuels are biomass fuels. These are again found from plants and animals. You have plant oils and then animal matter that's converted to compost in biogas plants. So an example for a renewable or biomass fuel is biogas, and then we have various oil seeds that can work as well as petroleum is in running machines such as cars. So plants provide us oils which we can use as fuel, and animal matter is basically is being converted to compost in a biogas plant, and the biogas that emanates from it can be used as fuel. So these are the energy sources that are classified as fuels. Now, when we look at other sources which are traditional, we come across sources such as wind and water. We have traditional dams that are used for energy production, and we also have windmills, which were earlier used to grind corn and other grains using wind, and now we have wind farms where we convert wind energy to electricity. So water, the energy from water is called hydropower, and hydropower is obtained by water getting stored in dams. And once the water reaches the dams, it's then let through a tunnel with turbines, and these turbines then spin to form electricity. And the exact mechanics of turbines spinning to form electricity is found in grade 12, that's electromagnetic induction. So it's basically spinning a magnet, so therefore that produces electricity. So hydropower is an essential source of electricity for areas with a lot of water or with a lot of moving water. So we have a lot of dams in India, and India has been reliant on hydropower for a long period of time. Hydroelectricity is what we generate today with turbines spinning due to the action of the water. Now, windmills were used to grind out grains or pump up water from wells. So for those tasks, windmills were used. But now we have wind farms that contain wind turbines. Now these turbines also use electromagnetic induction. They turn the wind energy, the kinetic energy of the wind, and convert it to electricity. So they have a generator inside them, and the generator converts the kinetic energy into electrical energy. We also have other uses with wind energy. For example, we power our transport with wind as well. We use yachts and sailing boats to travel in earlier days. So and it's still being used today in recreational purposes. So therefore, wind is an important source of energy because we've been using it for a long time, and also it's clean. So the good thing about these types of energy sources is that they are traditional and they're also renewable, which means that they do not run out. The reason why wind energy is so common is because wind is formed due to the differential heating that takes place across the earth, and also due to local conditions. Water moving through rivers as well as streams and also oceans have a lot of energy in them. So therefore, water is an ideal source of mechanical as well as electrical energy. Now, wind energy and water energy by themselves do not pollute things. However, they do cause harm to the environment, because when you construct dams, most of the times the marine habitat gets fragmented due to the dams, and also the terrestrial habitat gets submerged because of the dams. And flying birds as well as insects would be harmed because of the action of wind turbines, which spin really fast. So therefore, these energy sources do not pollute the environment. They are renewable, but then they do pose a security threat to animals and other organisms in the environment. Now, let's look at some other sources of energy. We know that plants are unique in the environment because they are autotrophs. That means they produce their own food. And the way they produce their own food is by a complicated process known as photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, solar energy gets converted to chemical energy, which is what we call starch, or food for short. So plants represent the very first working of solar energy in the environment. And today we use a similar principle in order to get power from the sun. So we use solar energy in two ways. We heat water with solar boilers, and we also use photovoltaic cells. Now, these are cells made out of semiconductors such as silicon and germanium, and they produce electricity. So they produce electricity without having to go through electromagnetic induction. This is a fairly new branch of physics that you will study in grade 12. So the reason why the sun is a really important source of energy is because it is the primary source of energy. The energy that we all get, from whether it's from wind or water or from biosources even, they're all powered by the sun, because plants, they gain their energy ultimately from the sun. It gives off light and heat energy, and its rays have the potential to be used as a very good energy source. Now, solar energy in particular is a renewable source of energy, but it is also alternative. So that means it has not been in use for a long time. It came along fairly recently. So that means a lot of research still needs to go on into these kinds of sources of energy. The reason being that right now our solar panels are not as effective as the leaves of plants. So if we're able to increase the efficiency of generating electricity from the sun, we might as well dispose of fossil fuels and other stuff, because the sun is an extremely powerful source of energy. It gives off a lot of energy in terms of kilojoules. So therefore, that makes it an extremely viable source of energy, and therefore research is being done on improving our solar energy catchment devices. So the sun, in addition to giving off light and heat energy, it provides stored energy that we use as fuels, or whether it be animals or plants. So in all of these ways, we are powered by the sun, but powered by the sun directly is still under research. Now, there are other types of energy which do not require the sun, and these are geothermal as well as radioactive energies, nuclear energy for short. So again, these energies, they are alternative, and to some extent, they lie between renewable and non-renewable. Now, geothermal energy uses the heat of the earth. So we know that the earth is made up of layers, and the top layer is what we call the lithosphere, and it is on top of the molten magma. So magma is pretty hot, and in some places the magma creeps up onto the surface, and that makes the ground really hot. So the water that's present in the soil or in between the rocks gets heated up as well, and we get steam buildups in those sites. So this steam that we get naturally is a very good source of energy. It's heat energy from the Earth's core, and it rolls out in the form of geysers as well as hot springs. So geothermal energy can also be used to power up, houses as well as other machines, due to the fact that we can use the steam to rotate turbines, and we use electromagnetic induction in order to generate electricity from it. And also the heat by itself can be used to warm ourselves. So therefore, the heat of the earth is also a very good source of energy. It's alternative, and it does not pollute the earth as much as fossil fuels do. Now, radioactive substances are used in order to generate nuclear energy. Now, basically, nuclear energy is the source of energy where we have to blow up the nucleus of an atom with particles called neutrons, and when we do that, we generate a lot of heat. And this heat from nuclear energy is, being used to generate electricity by spinning turbines made of steam. So what we get is that the heat from the nuclear energy plants, it heats up water, and that water turns to steam, and that steam turns up turbines in order to generate electricity. We use a lot of radioactive substances. We can use a lot of radioactive substances in order to produce nuclear energy, but the most common fuels, or nuclear fuels as we call them, are uranium and plutonium. So these two are radioactive elements, and from these radioactive elements, when we bombard them with particles, they generate a lot of heat, and this heat can be used to generate energy. Now, nuclear energy is pretty good for industries which are trying to move away from coal as well as other non-renewable sources of energy. The big problem with nuclear energy is that it is unsafe, because once you use uranium and plutonium in a nuclear power plant, they become radioactive, and they can cause a lot of problems when it comes to storage as well as contact with humans. So therefore, nuclear energy is also pretty dangerous because of the problems with handling the radioactive substances after you've used them to create it, to capture energy. So nuclear energy is also a fairly new development. So these are classified as alternative sources. So these are also quite promising, but then the safety aspect needs to be reviewed as well. So we have now explained the complete mind map. We looked at energy by itself. What do we call a source of energy? The ideal things that we look for to find a good source of energy. We looked at energy changes, how energy changes according to the law of conservation of energy. We looked at various forms of energy, how does energy get released, and we looked at sources such as fuels, wind, water, the sun, geothermal energy, as well as nuclear energy. Now, mind maps are a pretty good way of revising for exams and stuff, but there are other tools as well. For example, you can use flowcharts to do the same thing as well. So we have a flowchart here for sources of energy. So it says that, first the top layer says non-renewable energy. So again, these are energy sources that when we use them excessively, they do run out in the near future. And the most common example for non-renewable energy are fossil fuels, and the examples of fossil fuels are coal, petroleum, coke, and natural gas. So coal is, plant material. Petroleum comes from animal fossils, and coke is basically carbon, and natural gas is, the is what we find along with petroleum, which also powers our daily routine. For example, CNG and LPG, etc. Those are, sources of energy that we derive from natural gas. So coal is remains of plants and animals. Petroleum is remains of animals beneath the earth, into the sea, or porous rocks beneath the earth. And coke is the destructive distillation of coal, and natural gas is the gas that is evolved when you form petroleum under the earth. Now, coal is used as a fuel in thermal power plants to generate electricity, and it can also be used for heating purposes in homes. Petroleum is used as a fuel for vehicles, and it's used as industrial fuel in the form of LPG. Coke is a reducing agent in metallurgical processes, and it can also be used to make biogas. Natural gas is used as CNG in transport vehicles, and it's also used as a source of carbon in industries. So these are, the various types of non-renewable energy sources. Now, we know non-renewable sources are conventional, and the examples being coal and petroleum, and they are used in thermal power plants in order to produce electricity. But we can also produce electricity using renewable sources, for example, wind. Earlier, we used to use windmills in order to drop water or, grind corn, but now we can use wind turbines to produce electricity. Water is used in a hydropower plant in order to spin turbines that produce electricity. Biomass can be converted in a biogas reactor. So we get compost on one end, and on the other end, the gas that's formed can be used as fuel. It's used as a biofuel. So therefore, biogas, when we use it to burn, when we burn it, then we can generate heat that can be used to convert to form electricity. Now we have solar appliances such as solar water boilers as well as solar panels that convert the energy from the sun to electricity. We also have nuclear power plants that how do we say that? Let's look at it. So in a nuclear power plant, we split up atoms, and that releases a lot of energy, and that energy is used to, boil water and form steam, and that steam is used to run turbines, and those turbines, convert the heat energy to electricity. And finally, we have geothermal sources. These are energy sources from under the earth, and these also can be used to power up turbines and produce electricity. Next, we look at alternate sources of energy. These are sources which are fairly new. They are under development. We have various sources such as the sun, which we can use, from which we derive solar energy. This can be used as solar cookers, solar panels or cells. We have solar water heaters, and also other methods of getting solar power. When we look at wind, we use the kinetic energy of the wind to form electricity and to grind stuff such as corn as well as grains. So windmills were earlier used to grind corn or draw up water from wells. Wind generators use the kinetic energy of the wind to convert, kinetic energy to electricity, and these are usually found in wind energy farms in a lot of places around the world. We also have these farms in India, especially in Tamil Nadu. Now, when we look at water, water is an important source of energy. We call that hydro energy. So we basically, block the water with dams, and then we run the blocked water through turbines, and then these form the setup of a hydroelectricity power plant. India is reliant a lot on hydro energy. We can also use dead and decaying matter to form bioenergy. These can be used as biogas as well as biomass. So the biomass by itself can be converted to oils and source of fuel, and the biomass is also converted to manure that we can use in our farms. But also, when we put biomass in a biogas reactor, we get gas as a residue in the end, and this gas, which we call biogas, can be used as a fuel by itself. Now, when we look at water, when we look at hydro energy, we primarily focus on energy from rivers as well as streams that can be blocked with the help of dams. However, we can also use the water in the sea as a source of energy, because seas have, a lot of movement, such as tides, waves, and ocean temperature changes as well. So these forms of energy can be exploited in order to form electricity, in order to make electricity. And finally, we can use the earth itself. So the earth, is hot beneath the surface. The super hot magma sometimes come up to the surface, and it turns water to steam, and this steam can be used to convert to form electricity, and that's called geothermal energy. We use electric generators and steam turbines in order to harness geothermal energy. And finally, we can also gain energy from the nucleus of an atom. This is called nuclear energy. These are usually done in nuclear reactors and nuclear power plants, where atoms are broken down to form a lot of heat. The heat is transferred by water to turbines. So water is converted to steam. The steam passes through turbines, and the turbines generate electricity. So that concludes this episode of Mind Maps. We hope you found this episode interesting. For more of our useful and interesting content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, that is Brain Blitz Audios. We have a lot of videos on grade 10 mind maps. You can always hit the playlist that's found in the description. Its link is in the description box below. And also you can hit the notifications button for getting our latest updates. So, until the next webisode, take care, stay safe, bye-bye for now.